right, so hi everyone. My name is Aarron. I'm going to do a philosophical evaluation of the movie Silent Hill, the 2006 iteration. There's also several video games that have the same storyline and narratives as Silent Hill, but I'm going to evaluate philosophically the 2006 film, um, directed by, I have that here, just a moment. Directed by Christophe Gans and written by Roger Avary from Konami Studios. Um, Theoretically speaking, this will act as an almost psychiatry class into phobia deconstruction. Since if you know anything about Silent Hill, the 2006 film, then you would know that it has a lot to do with phobias and fear learning, the amygdala part of the brain. Um, in my opinion, anyways. So, without further ado, after I check to see if there's anything in my teeth, um, let's get this thing started. So, the film starts. Let's see. I kind of just like wrote all this down this morning. The film starts with a scene with Officer Sybil Bennett, embodied gloriously by Lauren Holden, as you can see in my notes here, and Rose da Silva, as performed by Radha Mitchell. So, Officer Bennett seems to be a character portrayed across time in Rose da Silva's psychiatric delusion. So, in the film, Rose kind of loses it, if you will, and they go into a section called Silent Hill, which is sectioned off socially. So there's a do not enter sign, and um, it seems that Rose is trying to take care of um, Sharon, a child that they're charged with caregiving. However, they seem to be doing this really unreasonably. So they kind of take a Matilda attitude, as discussed by Paris and Hollywood. The Matilda attitude, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm big, you're small, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's very immature and ineffective way to argue. However, Officer Bennett tries to stop Rose from going wherever they're going through a routine traffic stop, and Rose kind of just presses on the gas as soon as the officer exits the vehicle and goes into Silent Hill, despite the closed and locked gate. They kind of ran through it, scaring Sharon as well. So this endeavor into Silent Hill is activated by Rose, and my theory into the metaphysics of Silent Hill is that this is the psychiatric delusion of Rose in the film. So everything that Rose is afraid of. So if this was a neuroscience class, then in essence, figuratively speaking, we'll be going into Rose's amygdala. So if we're doing a psychiatric evaluation on a patient during intensive outpatient therapy or during talk therapy, psychoeducation, psychotherapy, would be kind of trying to enter into Rose's amygdala or Mitchell's amygdala to figure out why they have learned to be afraid of certain things. A phobia is defined as an irrational fear. So we're trying to figure out why Rose has this phobia of authority because it seems like they don't even want to give Officer Bennett a chance to explain why they pulled them over. They just assume like they're doing something bad. Well, that's my theory, but it seems heavily guarded, especially since Christopher Da Silva, the partner presumably of Rose, played by Sean Bean, seems to kind of have this similar attitude towards authority that um, someone's out to get them. So both of the De Silvas believe or behave as if someone is out to get them. It's very strange. So it's kind of a good thing that they go into Silent Hill because it evaluates this fear seriously instead of dismissing it or disregarding it. It presents it as something actual and something very real, which is pretty endearing. Um, so a bit of context before Rose and Sharon and perhaps Officer Bennett, which I'll explain a bit later, go into Silent Hill. Sharon's son seems to be challenged with sleepwalking, also known as nocturnal traveling or somnambulism or disassociation. So, in theory, this is disassociation because as Sharon, the child, goes to bed, or the young adult, the young person, because sleepwalking is generally understood as something that young people deal with more than older individuals. They disassociate from their body. So their mind is resting, but their body disassociates from that concept and it is actively awake and moving and curious and moving throughout the world. Very dangerous, right? Because it's like a body moving without a mind. So the amygdala is also asleep, right? So it doesn't have this fear learning activated to understand what danger is. So in essence, Sharon can walk off a cliff, run into a door, because there's no understanding of danger because there's no understanding of fear to guide that. So, as I mentioned, Rose Sun seems to have this consistent disregard and disrespect for social authority. Police officers, later we'll figure out maybe it goes into healthcare, into nurses, and then it goes into theology as well, as far as congregations go, and pastorhood. So, just anyone who has this elevated understanding of things that Rose is interested in, they seem to repel that and run away from it, which is pretty dangerous. There's this part of a delusion is that only oneself exists in the world and everyone else is just an extension of the psyche. Um, Descartes in the 17th century, Rene Descartes disproved that with dualism in their six meditations on first philosophy. However, time being a funny thing, an ontological concept, there still seems to be some people who understand the world in that way. Now, if people can understand the world in this way without putting other people down, then that's totally fine. But if they run through locked gates that say do not enter, then it's a problem, right? Because those are social barriers like a hijab. So we're gonna fast forward a little bit to 32:59 in the film, and I watched it on Tubi TV this morning. I've been watching it all day actually. I watched it on Tubi TV. Oh, just one moment, I will check to see where I am on time right now. Very good. 10 minutes. So I watched on Tubi TV, and at 32:59, Officer Bennett seemed to encounter an objectified iteration of a pregnant person, and this is largely my theory, by the way. So this is very like personal from not personal, but like specific to my personal philosophies and my theories, my own theories in philosophy. Um, so to kind of explain the pregnant person like ideas. I wrote that is the philosophical understanding of the ontology of socialization while pregnant is exaggerated. So the thing about phobias is like they're irrational. Phobia is defined as an irrational fear. So they take totally normal things, totally reasonable things such as chairs, tables, spiders, clowns, plants, um, people, African American people, pregnant individuals, and they create fear around these people. And that fear is not sound, so it's not true, but it is validated in the psyche. So it seems like something real. Um, so that's what I mean by ontology. So the philosophy of how these things relate to each other, how what is unreal or not real or imaginary relates to what is real, and that connection is ontology. That strain between those two things is ontology. So in Silent Hill, it's kind of, and I use this word in glory and joy, and academically, but it's weaponized and it's horrified in order to articulate the representation of the delusion and the irrational fear around individuals that are pregnant, the symptoms that come with being pregnant, especially like in nursing and childbearing, and romantic socialization, aromantic socialization, and this is this is likely, and that's the thing about phobia. Since they are irrational, it's hard to validate them sometimes, especially in academia, reasonably. However, individuals that are pregnant may have this stigma, this social stigma around them that they're challenged with in society. And that may have a chain reaction to cause people, even though they want to be pregnant, perhaps they want to bear a child or nurse. Um, and ontologically, again, it connects right back to nursing, a profession that glorifies childbearing and makes an entire profession founded on it by Florence Nightingale, um, American statistician. Oh, yeah, American statistician. I think that's fair. That's a bit of a elevated concept about American statistics, but um, I digress a little bit. I humbly admit. Um, However, at the time interval that I mentioned, there's this morning sickness, horrified morning sickness iteration, as if this is something like toxic, as if this liquid that is spewing from the body is something toxic like acid. And it goes right back to hemophobia, the irrational fear of blood. So it takes something completely normal, such as let's not even call them symptoms, just because that word is kind of weighted sometimes, heavily weighted. Let's call them iterations or ways to move throughout the universe as a particular person with a particular role in society, which is something totally encouraged, in fact, preferred in society, especially right now. Um, so that was just an introductory example of Rose's delusion, how something completely normal is horrified into a trope or a stereotype. Um, and Rose's endeavor into Silent Hill can be understood as them deconstructing all of their delusions, deconstructing all of their phobias, and realizing that they have the strength to be an individual and not be afraid of these things that are totally natural about the universe, about the world. And this is when I considered the awesome theory that even Officer Bennett's place or their role in Silent Hill could be a figment of Rose's imagination. And I do acknowledge that earlier I said it's a very dangerous way to think about the world, as an extension of one mind. However, each mind matters, and I believe, especially with relativism being so popular now, and relativism being almost on a rebellion of popularity now. I say this as a logician, someone who studies logic and argumentation. Um, well, as well as Catholicism, which in essence is the theology of love, which is my argument, and also Sri's argument. And a book that I really recommend. It's called "Who Might I Judge?" Responding to Relativism with Logic and Love. It's a really cool book. In upper division philosophy, undergraduate philosophy at UC Irvine, I read it for one of the classes, Philosophy 101 or Philosophy 102W, Writing Philosophy, uh, Introduction to Knowledge. It was pretty awesome. So I highly recommend that book. We also evaluate the Matrix film. However, I digress again. So Officer Bennett and the Silent Hill film, at the beginning, from the beginning, they seem to be an extension of Rose's psyche. And I wrote this whole thing about how, well, Silent Hill was originally like a city that was burned to the ground. Um, how, for example, the cannabis plant is it's a plant. It's part of forestry. So the qualities of a cannabis plant is that a cannabis plant consumes massive amounts of carbon dioxide. So the cannabis plant is has the ability to absorb twice as much like carbon dioxide as the average tree. So when this plant is burned, it throws off the natural reciprocal circulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the ecosystem between plants and people, between forestry and people. So it throws off the social ecology. This reciprocal exchange is thrown off because the carbon dioxide and from burning things, burning houses, burning trees. Carbon dioxide loses a oxygen molecule and becomes carbon monoxide, so it becomes toxic to the body. It destroys the oxygen intake in the body. So this is why burning fumes is deadly and toxic. So perhaps as a totally reasonable explanation into the Silent Hill film, this section of Silent Hill was sectioned off by a gate because that is the reasonable and safe distance from these carbon monoxide molecules that need time to settle into the earth and become carbon dioxide again to freely exchange reciprocal um, circulation with people and plants. However, when Rose ran into the gate, pardon me, when Rose ran into the gate against the gate's will in their car, with Sharon in the car, they probably released this massive amount, unreasonable amount of carbon monoxide into their lungs, and perhaps it created this hallucinatory effect based on metaphysics, based on theology, but also based on biology and neuroscience as well. This is what hallucinatory drugs do. They take one out of the reality, and they, in essence, when one consumes these things, you're telling your body you're preparing for something. So your brain is going to reasonably prepare for that. However, perhaps what you're telling your body you're preparing for, you actually don't know that you're telling your body you're preparing for that. So yeah, the idea that Officer Bennett is an extension of Rose's imagination is supported because Officer Bennett seems to take on the attitude that is not common with police officers, and it's very against the book with police officers. The idea that I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. So Officer Bennett in the iteration of Silent Hill acts very different from the Officer Bennett before they enter Silent Hill. Um, Officer Bennett acts reasonably. Sharon, for example, outside of Silent Hill, if they're okay, and then Sharon says, "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," and Officer Bennett says, "Good girl." And then Officer Bennett allows Rose and Sharon to leave, even though it seems that they find something suspicious about Rose's behavior. However, in Silent Hill, it just seems it just seems like Officer Bennett is totally done with this, and Officer Bennett is almost like confirmation bias. How one's irrational fears can be confirmed just because we continue to defend them and create these unreasonable arguments for them. So the reality is still, the delusion is still not reality. However, it becomes almost like our personal reality, and then we continue to buy into that and just go further and further down the rabbit hole. um, so Officer Bennett, just in Silent Hill, it's kind of humorous, as you can see. Perhaps my attitude is just jubilant, but they take on the attitude of Rose's delusion of what they're afraid of. They become what Rose is afraid of. That the officer is not going to give them a chance to explain. So the Officer Bennett doesn't give Rose a chance to explain. They just arrest Rose and put Rose in handcuffs and don't ask them any questions and don't validate their experiences or their opinions. It's very unreasonable. Um, However, it seems to buy into the delusion of what Silent Hill is, and it further propels and supports the idea that this can be a almost like an intensive therapy or delusion deconstruction for Rose going into Silent Hill, not literally, but like figuratively speaking, in film and lit the same way we do in fiction and literature and nonfiction. Um, yeah, I'm going to skip over this for now and perhaps do a second video regarding theology because these are very complex topics here. Perdition as a state of mind, which seems at this point to be what Silent Hill is. So another one of my theories about this Silent Hill film that I really liked was the take on gender between masculine and feminine presenting actors in the film. I believe it was really interesting for me to be able to see this. A gift to be able to see this, and really interesting for me to be able to see this because at first I didn't really comment on it and I didn't really write about it because I was like, maybe it's just me, my phenomenology, the science of my first person consciousness. However, um, the interaction between Officer Thomas Gucci and Christopher De Silva, the partner, I believe, of Rose De Silva, is this almost fourth wall break with the the telling of the history of Silent Hill, and about how the city burned down, and also they were challenged with these outdated, and insidious views of personhood and philosophy that reiterated what happened in Salem in U.S. history with the witch trials. Anyone that disagreed with, kind of like the forming of the United States of America, anyone that disagreed with head honcho got burned at the stake, which is totally unreasonable. However, there's a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar called "Sympathy," and there's a line in there that says, it is talking about scars, and the line is, and it pulses with a keener sting. So even though as a humanity, as a personhood, we have these things that we got over in history, whereas 2023 now and Salem was so long ago, right? There's still, that's just our view of time, right? Time is a social construct that persons agree with. For example, it's 2:13 p.m. right now in Los Angeles, California, United States of America. However, that is just our section of the world right now. We all agree that the time is 2:13, and even on the East Coast, we don't agree that it's 2:13 because it's about 2 hours later on the East Coast right now. So that's a great example of time being a social construct. That doesn't mean like it is 2:13 just period. It's not a fact about the universe. That's just how we understand. So the Earth may understand time in a bit of a different kind of way, in essence, especially being recorded for at least, at the very least, and it's more than that, but 2023 years. Salem could just seem like yesterday, the burning of all those human beings, unjustly. Every single burning was unjust. Um, so this iteration of what happened in the city of Silent Hill is almost this reiteration of history, and it helps deconstruct the barrier between speaker and audience to kind of like wink at the audience, the pathos or the ethos or logos, to iterate the idea that there's something bigger going on here in this storytelling. There's something deeper than just what hits the surface that's going on. And then you get into world blame, as discussed by Dr. Burns in Feeling Great from Stanford University in California, and reiterated by Dr. Mascola at the University of California, Irvine, in psychiatry. I would highly recommend their book called Feeling Great, and I will highly recommend Stanford University psychiatric research. Super cool. Up there. Southern California. Central California and Northern California is where Stanford University is. If you do not know that, it's in Stanford, California. So I would highly recommend more research into that if that's something that interests you. Um, so I guess this is going to be a part one. I'm at a standstill. I was just about to start discussing gender, and that can be some. I love studying gender. I'm a huge intersectional feminist, so that can be something that takes up a lot of time. So whomever whomever's ears this hits, I appreciate your attentiveness, and I wish you the best for the rest of your day. I hope your world is beautiful today, as was once told me by Lansdowne. Thanks again for listening. Au revoir. Ciao. Bye.